There's nothing to be done for it, I guess. Welcome to another week in the books. I'm going to be telling you about what I got into this week, and fortunately, of the 3 things I finished, 2 of them I really enjoyed. I had such a good time with, so I can't wait to talk to you about those 2. I'm going to pull up my Goodreads here in a second, and then we will get right to it. First thing I finished this week was The Undead Fox of Deadwood Forest. And to me, that seems like a lot of times to use the word dead in the title, but I guess it is what it is. It didn't detract, at least, from how much I enjoyed this story and how much fun I thought it was and how cute it was. And this one is a middle grade fantasy dealing with some heavier themes through an avenue that doesn't feel heavy because the main character is the undead fox from the title, and then we've got a side character of a badger who comes along and kind of throws his whole undead life through a whirlwind because things don't go as he has been used to them going, and so it really is like exploring some more serious things through an unconventional way that I think middle grade, it works for that age level. Works for me as an adult too. Like, that was a good way to be thinking about some things, or just having thoughtful experiences throughout. So what we have here is, as I said, a fantasy, and Claire the fox, he is our main character. He is what they call an usher of animals in the afterlife, and that essentially is like a friendlier version of Davy Jones' ferrying souls. So these animals who have passed away show up at Claire's little cottage in the woods. He kind of breaks it to them like, hey, you are here because you have died, and now I must help you get to the afterlife. And there are 4 different realms of the afterlife, and where you go depends on how you lived your life. So there is pain, pleasure, progress, and peace. And because Claire is undead and in this specific role of usher, he is like connected to the afterlife, which is portrayed as like this invisible force. And so he can sense where this animal needs to be going. Just because that's what happens when you're an usher. You get that enhanced sense. And so he kind of helps them be on their way to the final piece of their journey. But then, one night, a badger shows up on his doorstep, and that is problematic for Claire. 1, because he has some trauma from his past life related to badgers, and so he's not pleased at all to be finding a badger on his doorstep. But then, bigger than that is the badger doesn't seem to be accepted by any of the realms. And it's not like you can just waltz into a realm and be like, okay, this is where I'm going to spend my afterlife. You have to be accepted into it. Like, the afterlife the realm, if you wander into the wrong one, will kick you out and send you back to try again. And so she's not going into any of them. That hasn't ever happened to him before. He's been doing this for 6 years, and he's like, I don't know what this is. But then in the forest across the road from Deadwood, a bird has made some sort of prophecy that is predicting curious events happening in Deadwood. And so, of course, Claire and Ginger Snipes the badger, they set out on this little adventure to try to figure out, like, what does the bird mean by that? What are those events? And Claire's like, how do I fix this problem? Because I just want to go back to my quiet ushering life of cultivating my mushroom garden and helping souls on their way. And of course, this is a story of like friendship and Claire dealing with, from his past life, feeling unloved, also dealing with like self-love and self-image sort of things. And there was a lot going on, but in a digestible way and in a manageable way. So I thought it was good. I thought, again, it was cute and it was fun. And I really liked Claire and Ginger Snipes. I like having a fox and a badger as 2 main characters, I guess. So I would recommend this one. And I think don't let middle grade, make you turn away from this if you're like, that sounds kind of childish. It was a lot of fun. Next up is Not in My Book, which is a rom-com that I think it got onto my radar because like back around Valentine's Day, I was like, oh, I should read a romance. That would be, thematic. That would be good. So I went on to my library's website and looked around to see what might be good. And then, of course, everyone is trying to read romances around Valentine's Day. So I had to put it on hold, and it finally came in. So I read it this week. And I was really looking forward to the premise because it's essentially around like a grad program for writers, and the two main characters, the couple that emerges, are like in the same writing workshop, and it's an enemies to lovers, which I think is maybe my favorite trope in rom-coms. I'd have to think about that a little more, but I think that's my favorite trope. And I was like, this will be fun, and it'll be literary, like all the references they make and all that good stuff. And it mostly was working for me until the last quarter, where then it didn't. So we've got Rosie, and then we've got Aiden. And Rosie is a native to Tennessee, but she moves to New York to do this grad program, and she has all of these dreams about being a romance writer. And Aiden is the more serious, like, I write literary fiction, I have no time for your romance. And so in like the writing workshops and writing critiques, he's not exactly kind to her writing and is very dismissive of it, doesn't take it very seriously. And there's a lot of like verbal arguments happening in class that get very catty, that kind of stray into like mean territory, to the point where their teacher, who is also Rosie's mentor, asks to like meet with them in her office and is like, I have to kick you out of my section because you both are interrupting like the whole space that I'm trying to facilitate. Like, I promised the other students that this would be a safe, respectful place for us to bring our writing, to critique each other, and you're undermining that. And so I'm gonna kick you out of this section of the class. And they're of course like, wait, is there any way we can like not do that? Like, we won't argue with each other anymore. We'll be on our best behavior, kind of thing. And the conclusion that is reached is that they are going to be writing a book together as their project for that class. Because originally it was like each person had to write a novel over the course of the year. But now it's like, you guys are going to write a novel together. You don't respect each other's genres, so you gotta put a romance thread in there, but maybe it doesn't have to have the happily ever after, and it can take more of a literary fiction ending instead of just all the like bows tied up and everything's all lovey-dovey in the end. Obviously you can imagine that they don't love that idea, but they're like, we don't want to be kicked out of this class, so we will do that. And then of course, as you're writing together, as you're hanging out to get to know the characters better, and figure out where your story is going, what do you think is gonna happen in a romance? They're obviously gonna fall for each other. But then the ending was what threw me, where it just seemed that the main character, who all along I kind of was thinking that she was very immature for being like in the latter half of her 20s. I was like, you're kind of talking like a 18-year-old, 17-year-old instead of someone who is in grad school approaching their third decade of life soonish. She just seemed to blow out of proportion the drama at the end, that I was like, honey, you just need to kind of chill. Maybe work on yourself a little bit more before you're trying to figure out this relationship stuff. But it was what it was. Didn't end up loving it. Could be for someone else. I think other people on Goodreads, I was seeing that they're like, yeah, this was really cute, I love this. Spicy. So you gotta skip some scenes if you're not into that. I did some skimming because I was like, this is too much for me. But if you want like bookish literary enemies to lovers, this is for you. The last thing I finished up this week is the second book in the Anne of Green Gables series, and that is Anne of Avonlea. And I mentioned this in a previous vlog where I was talking about the the first book that I recently read. I love Anne, and I love this series so much. And Marilla, Diana, Gilbert, they're all such good secondary characters. In this book, we've got the addition of Davy and Dora, who are kind of distant cousins of Marilla's, who their mother dies, and so they're young children and they come to live with Anne and Marilla, so you've got some added newness to the story, even though it's still just the same like slice of life around Green Gables and their small little town on Prince Edward Island. And so some people might be like, this is too bland, too vanilla, but I really enjoy the way that Anne sees the world, and you can just tell that she loves life and she sees things very whimsically and it's kind of poetic, and I enjoy that. I just think it's good. Like, it is light reading, but it's cozy light reading, and so it's not just insubstantial or fluffy, and I like that. And in this story, we see her become a teacher. She has the schoolhouse at Avonlea, and so we've got the misadventures of being a teacher, but also misadventures of just stuff at home, because, you know, Anne is a girl of ideals and ideas, and sometimes they don't always pan out, and that is just how life goes. And so we get more of that. Like I mentioned, there's the little twins who come to live at Green Gables, and they are full of mischief. Well, I should say Davy is full of mischief, not Dora. And then we get the introduction in this book of Miss Lavender. That's kind of in the second half of the book, who is an older woman who's kind of a recluse, but you learn like her backstory, and there's a little romance in there of what her story is like. Paul Irving, who's one of Anne's pupils, and Anne just thinks he's a little genius. All this good stuff. And of course, Anne is making decisions about continuing to teach, or do I go to college, and what will happen with Marilla. You're just keeping up with the people from the first book as they're stepping into a new season of life, and I just think it's lovely. I think it's fun. I think I will always love rereading these books. If you are looking for an easy series to just be chipping away at with nothing as far as spice or smut or whatever you may be trying to avoid for just some easy reading, there's like 6 books in this series, and they're not super long, they're not super difficult to get through. And if you don't find these descriptions and these aspects of story boring or bland, then this is definitely for you, because it's just fun. It's a good time to be hanging out on Prince Edward Island with Anne and all the rest. So I always will recommend Anne of Green Gables. Well, that's all for this week. And next week, it's going to be a little bit different just because we have a friend coming to stay, and I will be busy doing maybe touristy, adventure-y, hanging out things with them. So next weekend, I'll just have some recommendations for you instead of my weekend review. This time, recommendations are going to be books that I think could pull you out of a reading slump, because I know that happens. We've all been there. And so I've got some good ideas for you in that vlog coming up. If you have any recommendations for me, as usual, please send them along. I'm currently listening to a recommendation that I got a little bit ago. It was called The Lost Girls of Paris, I think. It's a World War II multi-POV story, and it seems like it's going to be maybe a little bit of a mystery, but also involves some like spy work, undercover people in World War II. So we're gonna see how that goes. Again, I'm not very far into it, but it's off to a good start. So anyway, I will catch you next time, and until then, I hope you have some good reads coming your way.